5 ways to ruin your firewood and how to avoid it. Here we go. Number 1, I see this is very common that people leave their wood on the ground. They'll cut it into rounds, or they'll cut it and split it and it just sits on the ground. Well, what happens is the ground has moisture and the wood will suck up moisture from the ground into your wood. And what happens is it stays wet. It does not dry. Matter of fact, not only does it not dry, it can start growing mold and fungus, mushrooms. Bugs will like it. It'll rot, it'll decay. On the ground is not good. Now in some areas, if you live in a very dry area, maybe you can leave your wood on the ground because you don't have a lot of ground moisture. You're on rocks maybe. Maybe you don't have a lot of rain. Maybe you get sun and wind all the time and your temperatures are always high. Maybe you get away with it. But where I am here, we get a lot of rain, we get a lot of snow, the ground is wet, and the wood that I have available to me, if it's on the ground, it'll wick moisture up from the ground and it'll get nasty. It turns to nasty crap fast. And it doesn't take long, a few months, and they can start rotting and turn into mush. So you don't want that. So what happens is that moisture sucks up from the ground, and especially if you already got wood that is green, cut, fresh cut, it's already wet. You suck that moisture up from the ground, then you cover it with other wood. Basically, no sun or wind can get to it, and it starts to rot. And you don't want rotten wood because there are certain kinds of wood that will rot fast. Now, one that I can think of right away is birch. Birch rots fast. Aspen rots fast. A lot of the pines will rot fast. Box elder will rot fast. Generally, it's the softer, lower grade, lower BTUs type woods that will rot faster. Really good woods, like say your oaks for sure, hickory probably, beech, ironwood, those kind of woods are going to rot very slowly, so you got lots more time. Getting it off the ground as soon as you can will help it dry faster. And it'll keep it from rotting, which is the most important thing, because there's no sense doing all the work to just let it lay on the ground and rot. I drive past people's houses and their farms and acreages that they have, and you see wood just in a pile, and you see it year after year after year. And what happens on the ground, the moisture, like I said, will suck up from the ground, the wood will suck it up. Then you get leaves and debris and pine needles and all that stuff stacked on top of it. And so basically you're just creating a giant mulch pile, or a pile that's going to just decompose. You're basically like what you do with your waste materials that you want to have broken down to turn into dirt. That's what's going to happen. It's going to break down and turn into dirt and mush, and it'll be good fertilizer. So what you want to do to prevent this is get it off the ground. Put it on pallets, put it on runners, put it in a rack, store it in an area where it's not in contact with the ground. That is huge. Get it off the ground. The next way to ruin your wood really fast is kind of the opposite of that. There's people that will cut their wood, they throw it on the ground, they think, oh, we got to keep it dry from the rain and the weather and the sun and all that. And they put a tarp over the top of it. Not just on the top of it, all the way over it. And they'll even put weights, bricks, logs, rounds around the outside to hold that tarp down. Basically, you're creating, again, a terrarium. All that's going to do is keep all that moisture that's already in the wood, bring additional moisture up from the ground. It's going to start to rot. You're going to get bugs. You're going to get mold. You're going to get you're going to get decay. You're going to get rot. It's going to turn to useless wood in a very short amount of time. And like I said, certain kinds of wood will break down much faster than others. On the good side, you've got oak that lasts a very long time, even if it's on the ground. On the bad side, you've got birch and aspen, stuff like that, pine. If you get that on the ground, it's going to rot fast. So get it off the ground. And don't cover it to hold all that moisture in. Let it breathe. Wood needs to breathe to dry. It needs sun, it needs wind. The more sun and wind you can get it, the better. The area we have here for drying is fantastic. There's no shade, and we get wind almost all the time here. Whenever the sun is out, it's on the wood. Sun comes up in the east, it's on the wood. Sun's overhead, it's on the wood. Sun sets in the west, it's on the wood. If the wind's out of the west, it's out of the north, it's out of the south, it's out of the east. We always have wind. It's drying all the time. So get it in a good area and don't cover it completely. Let it breathe. Now some woods, like I mentioned, get punky very fast. Now there's also some kinds of woods that the bugs will get into and they will eat it up. They turn it to powder. Hickory is bad. Box elder, certain kinds of maple. Bugs will get into it and they just keep chewing on it, chewing on it. And if you wonder what all those piles of little bit of like sawdusty looking kind of stuff is at the bottom of your piles, that's bugs. They're eating your wood. The longer it sits there, the more they're going to eat it. So there's certain woods that won't last forever. There's also kinds of wood, and box elder's one of them, soft maple's one of them. Certain woods like that, they dry so much that they basically turn to air. They turn to powder. They get super dry. So you got 2, maybe 3 years on certain kinds of wood. Other kinds of wood will last a very long time as long as you keep the elements off of them. So what you want to do, so you make sure that your wood is going to be okay and good to burn and put out as much heat as possible. You want to burn it after it's dried, but not over dried. And that's something that's going to be different with each wood species. Generally, your nut trees are going to be excellent wood for a very long time. Any tree that produces fruit is generally good for a very long time. So you got cherry, you got apple, Osage orange, almond, hickory, oak trees. They all produce nuts and apples and fruit, stuff like that. Those trees will last longer. They're more dense wood and they will last much longer than a lot of the other woods. Another kind of wood that lasts a very long time is locust. Locust has some kind of a natural chemical makeup that it doesn't rot. Cedar is another kind of wood that lasts a very long time, doesn't rot. As long as you keep these woods dry, they will last a long time. Now another thing you can do to ruin your wood after putting a lot of work into it is to put it in the wrong place. And what I mean by that is, and I have made these mistakes, so that's how I know. If you store your wood between 2 trees, say you got trees that are 10, 20 feet apart, and you stack your wood all between those trees, and you go up, as high as you can reach, and if those trees are live trees with leaves or needles, and they move in the wind a lot, you know what's going to happen to that pile of wood? As those trees move, because they flex a lot, that wood is constantly shifting, and eventually your pile falls over. And if you're leaving that wood on a property, say for a year or 2, and you don't know it, that wood's going to be laying underground when you come back. Ask me how I know that. Yes, it has happened. You don't want to store your wood between trees, because as the trees blow in the wind, the wood will fall over and it'll end up on the ground. Now another mistake you can make, same concept, is you store your wood, even if you've got it on runners or stringers, it's usually a single row this will happen to. You have it on a single row, really long. Maybe you've got it 4 feet high, maybe you've got it 6 feet high, maybe you got it as high as you can reach, and you run it for 10, 20, 30 feet. And what happens? Wind can actually knock it over. I've seen it. That's happened to me. Another thing that's going to happen, as you stack your wood, you don't realize it, but it's starting to lean one way or the other, and it can tip over on you. So having your wood in rows, if you're going to stack it, close together so it can lean against each other, which is why a full cord stack is fairly solid. So when you're storing your wood, put it in a place where you know that you're going to get sun and wind, put it on something so it's not going to be tipping over. One of the things that happens also that I have had this happen to me, so I know this, I have had rows, single rows, and then double rows, even triple rows that stacked, and I went as high as I could. And I did it in the winter time, so this is one thing you got to remember. Winter time here, our ground freeze is solid as a rock, which is awesome. And I put pallets down, and I stacked all the wood on it, and I went high with it. And what happened is that one side faced south. And what happened this spring, that ground thawed on the south side. And when it thawed on the south side, it was still frozen on the north side. Well, all that weight, and the pile went like this and tipped over. All of it. I've had that happen a couple times. That was my limit, twice. And I've seen lots of people that have wood stacked, and I've seen that they have it in rows and they have it stacked, and it'll tip over. Usually it tips to the south, around here anyway, because the sun will hit it, it'll warm that ground up, thaw it, and it can tip over. Now there's one other thing that can tip your wood over, that is a varmint. Yes, the old woodchucks. I have had piles stacked years ago when I used to stack. Now I pretty much just do bins because it's faster, better, easier, dries better. It's awesome. Anyway, so I had these rows. Woodchuck tunneled underneath the wood, dug it all out, and created a weak spot, and the whole pile tipped over. So if you're going to stack your wood outside in the wintertime, make sure that you've got it wide enough and you've got it leaning in so that it doesn't go one way or the other. Make sure you've got it on a solid surface. Pallets, like I mentioned, are really good to stack on. And if you've got more pallet widthwise than you do wood, you're more stable. So that's something to think about. Now another thing you can do, and I mentioned this before about the trees, if you stack wood between trees, you can do that. We have done it without having the wood tip over, but what you got to do is the wood itself cannot be right up against the trees. What you got to do is put pallets vertically against the trees. They can just sit there. So you put pallets on the ground, pallets on the sides, and then the pallets just lean against the trees. So all the movement is the pallet, and then we stack 2 or 3 rows up against that pallet and the wood doesn't fall over. So that's another thing you can do to keep it from tipping over, laying on the ground, and rotting on you, because you don't want rotten wood. Not a good thing. That's a bad thing. So there you go. There are a bunch of things you can do to have your wood not get rotten, not get moldy, not get wet, turn to mush. All of those things are important. So if you put all the work into it, make sure you get the results at the end for the work that you did. Don't let it go to waste. That's it for today, folks. I'll be back here tomorrow morning, 5:30 a.m. But right now, you can go to my channel. There's 1,500 other videos on my channel all about firewood if you want to learn more. Good night, Irene.